All right, let's dive into one of history's most notorious rulers, Catherine de Medici. She was the Queen of France during one of its most brutal, chaotic periods. And believe me, her real story is way more complicated than the dark legend that's followed her around for centuries. So let's try and separate the woman from the myth. For over 400 years, words just like these have been stuck to Catherine's name. I mean, she's been cast as the ultimate historical villain, this Machiavellian queen pulling all the strings in a court soaked in blood. But you have to ask, where did this reputation actually come from? It all started right here. This quote. It's from a super popular and honestly vicious pamphlet that came out in 1575. Think of it as the original smear campaign. It was the founding document of her so-called Black Legend, a piece of political propaganda so powerful it has literally shaped how we see her ever since. Our job today is to look past all that and find the real person. To really get who the queen was, we first have to understand the brutal world that made her. Her story doesn't kick off in some fairy tale palace. Nope, it starts in a political firestorm where just staying alive was the name of the game. So, Catherine was born in Florence in 1519, and, tragically, within just a few weeks, both of her parents were dead. She was the last legitimate heir of the main Medici line, which instantly made her an incredibly valuable political pawn. To her uncles, who happened to be popes, she wasn't so much a niece as she was a chess piece, a tool they could use in the violent power games between France and the Holy Roman Empire. Her early life was what historians call an education in gangsterish brutality. I mean, she was taken hostage when she was just 8 years old during a revolt. From that terrifyingly young age, she had to learn diplomacy and survival. As you can see on this timeline, her marriage at 14 was a pure political power move. And it took another whole decade, and finally having a son, to secure her shaky position at the French court. And let me tell you, the French court was not a welcoming place. The snooty nobility just dismissed her as a commoner, the merchant's daughter. Then, for 10 agonizing years, she couldn't have children, which put her at constant risk of being divorced and sent away, all while having to deal with her husband's very powerful mistress. The way she survived all this wasn't through fighting, but through incredible patience and some seriously sharp political intelligence. Then, in 1559, boom, everything changes. Her husband, King Henry II, dies in a freak jousting accident. And just like that, Catherine is thrust right into the heart of power as the regent for her young sons. Her number one goal? Hold the kingdom together while it was literally being ripped apart by religious civil war. You have to picture France at this time. It was a powder keg. On one side, you had the super powerful, ultra-Catholic Guise family. On the other, the Protestant Bourbons. And both of them wanted to control the throne. Catherine's strategy was, for the time, pretty radical. She chose a middle path. She actually tried to create peace through religious toleration because she believed it was the only way to save the monarchy itself. And this table shows she wasn't just talking a big game. She was making real, concrete attempts to legislate peace. Just look at the progression here. First, the Edict of Amboise says, okay, being a heretic isn't the same as being a traitor. Then she basically gets rid of the death penalty for heresy. And finally, she tries to give Protestants the actual legal right to exist and worship. It was a brilliant, pragmatic plan. But tragically, the extremists on both sides just wouldn't have. And that leads us to the one event that would cement Catherine's Black legend forever, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in 1572. For centuries, this has been painted as her evil masterpiece. So the traditional story, the one you've probably heard, goes like this. Catherine lured all the Protestant leaders to Paris for her daughter's wedding, only to spring a deadly, pre-planned trap, having them all slaughtered in their sleep. It's a truly chilling story of a cold-blooded conspiracy. But is that what really happened? Well, modern historians have really challenged that old story. If you look at the theories on this slide, you'll see that while the idea of a big conspiracy is still out there, most historians today lean toward a completely different explanation. The consensus now is that the massacre wasn't some grand, evil plot, but a targeted assassination that went horribly, horribly wrong. This comparison really shows you the huge shift in thinking. The old myth, on the left, makes Catherine out to be a religious fanatic. But the modern view, on the right, suggests something totally different. A panicked leader who was reacting to a failed assassination attempt and real threats of a coup. Her decision to kill a few dozen leaders was a desperate, defensive move that accidentally unleashed this horrific wave of mob violence that shocked everyone, including her. But here's the thing. If we only talk about politics and massacres, we are missing a huge part of her story. Catherine wasn't just a political survivor. She was a visionary patron of the arts who completely reshaped the culture of France. So first, let's tackle one of the absolute juiciest myths about her court. The story goes that she had this elite squad of beautiful ladies-in-waiting, her flying squadron, who would seduce and blackmail powerful men to get political secrets. It's a great story, but is there any truth to it? The short answer is no. Historians today see the whole flying squadron thing not as a real spy ring, but as what they call a literary trope. Basically, it was a misogynistic smear tactic. It was a way for her male enemies to paint a powerful woman as sexually devious and her court as corrupt, which in turn justified their own opposition to her rule. And we actually have solid evidence that goes against the myth. When one of her ladies-in-waiting, a woman named Isabelle de Lemuel, actually did have a scandalous affair with a Protestant prince, Catherine didn't reward her for it. She was furious. She fired the woman and had her packed off to a convent. Her priority was always court decorum, not sexpionage. And the other famous myths? They also crumble pretty fast once you look closer. The story about the poisoned gloves? Medical records show the victim actually died of tuberculosis. Her famous poisoned cabinets? They were almost certainly for storing state documents or her collection of oddities. And her interest in astrology and Nostradamus? That wasn't black magic. In the Renaissance, that was considered a totally legitimate science. So what was her real legacy? Beyond all the politics, it was huge. She was one of the great builders of her era, using grand architecture to project the power of her family. She was a massive collector who brought sophisticated Italian taste to the French court. And she used these incredible festivals as tools of political propaganda. In fact, she sponsored what many consider to be the very first ballet in history. So how do we put these two very different pictures together? On one hand, you have the ruthless political mastermind of the legend, and on the other, the practical, culture-shaping ruler that we see in the historical record. Her final years were just tragic. She spent every last bit of her energy trying to negotiate peace for her favorite son, King Henry III. But his impulsive decision to assassinate his rivals completely unraveled her entire life's work of keeping the dynasty alive. She died just a few months before he himself was assassinated, which ended the Valois royal line for good. And this quote is maybe the best way to sum up her life. She wasn't some monster driven by hate. She was a pragmatist, a survivor, who was forced to walk this incredibly delicate line in an impossible political world, using the only tools a woman in her position really had: diplomacy, marriage, and culture. You know, in the end, Catherine's greatest success was probably just keeping the French monarchy from completely collapsing long enough for it to be passed on. The real question for us, then, is how we should remember her. Is she the serpent queen from the myth? Or is she the sovereign architect who laid the cultural and political groundwork for modern France? A woman who was ultimately a victim of a legend she couldn't control.